Although he lived in America, he was very British. They would have an English flag outside the front of the house, and every time I went over, we had to take supplies of Coleman's English mustard and Frey bentos, you know, steak and kidney pies, the Beano magazine, baked beans, and all this kind of stuff.
My brother Jabron had a very strong personality. We both thought about joining the army, whilst we were being brought up in Pakistan. So when we did move to England, it was something, I would say, our childhood dreams.
We weren't really a kissy cuddly brother-sister, I suppose. We were still quite young really, and more of a punch and a kick. See you later, kid. And David said to me, I'll see you in Vegas, kid.
The World Trade Center was bombed in '93 and Dad was there. I remember him saying at the time how scared he was. It really shook him up, and he said if anything happens like that again, I'll be out straight away, you know.
I started my basic training on 7th of January 2001, and I was deployed to Afghanistan in January 2002. My brother Jabron joined up 2 years after that. I saw it as my personal duty, and I believe my brother felt the same, to help people who needed outside help.
That week on the 7th of July, I was in a hotel in America. We turned on the news in the morning and we saw that there'd been a bomb in London. So I said, oh, my dad works in London. I'm going to ring and just make sure he's okay. David never even crossed my mind. He worked for the Guardian newspaper in Manchester. And I rang and spoke to my dad and said, oh, I've seen the news. He said, yeah, it's a little bit crazy here, but we're okay.
My brother phoned me up and said, I don't know if you've seen the news, this plane's gone into the World Trade Center. Nobody really knew what was happening. We thought it was a small plane, it was an accident, and it was the North Tower. You know, it wasn't the one that Dad was in. So you kind of keep half an eye on it. Slowly the news is breaking that this is something a bit bigger, and then there's the other plane that goes in. I went over to the department store where they had the TV section, and I stood there and watched it, and I got there just in time to see the South Tower fall.
The next morning, we were still in bed, fast asleep, and we got a phone call, and we picked up the room phone, and my dad came on the phone. He said, it's David. He'd gone to London that morning, and he hasn't come back. I said, well, what do you mean he hasn't come back? So they said, well, we've lost him. We don't know. He must be somewhere. We just can't find him. And I remember my mum took over the phone and she said to me, he's okay. She said, he's okay. We just don't know where he is.
I was at home and I remember vividly, 2:30 in the morning, my younger sister waking me up. She said there were a couple of people from the MOD. I don't know why. I instantly felt that my brother was no longer with me. As opposed to he being injured or
We were trying to phone his wife. It was excruciating trying to find any information. You see the crowds of people running away, and you're scanning the news, you know, to try and see a face in the crowds that you might recognise. You kind of have this hope, well, maybe, you know, maybe they've been knocked out or they've lost their memory through shock or something like that, and they're just wandering around not knowing who they are. And you have all these hopes and things that you cling on to.
And then as I put the phone down, the HR director, she said to me, I've booked you a flight, it goes in 3 hours. Go upstairs, pack your bags, you're going home, you need to be with your family. And as soon as I walked through the gates, my dad just burst into tears and fell to the floor. And we knew. And my mum wouldn't believe it. All the way home in the car, she said, we'll find him. We will find him. He'll be okay, I know he will. We'll find him.
It took a couple of days for us to find out that he had been in work that morning. People from his company said, we saw him, he was due to go into a meeting. I think it's then that you start to think, well, if they've got out and they saw him, why isn't he out?
And it took another 2 days until the police actually came to the house and said that they've confirmed it was David.
They could only sum it up as saying that we are sorry, but there was an incident, 2100 local time in Afghanistan, as a result of which Javron was killed. Almost instantly, and I think thanks to being in the army, the concept of soldiering on applied, because before his deployment to Afghanistan, we agreed upon telling our mother that Javron was actually going to Germany. I then went next door and told my mother as best as I could. Obviously there was an extreme response and reaction. What exactly happened? Why didn't you tell me that my Javron was in Afghanistan? And, you know, I want more news. And are you sure? Are you certain? Perhaps there's a part of her which to this day has not forgiven me. But I think at the same time she understands that we took that decision to protect her.
You sort of feel like you just need to be there. So me and my brother, we went over. We took the same train that Dad would have taken. I can't remember what street we came out on, but there were people kind of just milling around, you know, nobody was rushing anywhere. People were still in shock. And we got to this roadblock, talking to this policeman, asking him how we could get to ground zero. What do you want to get there for? What, you know, you don't need to go down there. No, then when we said, our dad was in there, we need to go down. And he kind of just completely melted and, you know, I'm so sorry. It was a very tender city, I guess. Broken place.
I arrived in New York last Saturday to start a new job. I don't think so I've ever held anybody responsible. I remember somebody asking me, do you hold the Taliban responsible? And having been to Afghanistan, having seen the kind of poverty and sort of underprivileged life people lead, and who am I to blame someone who's been given $20 a day to fire a weapon in a random direction? You know, wouldn't you do that to put food on the table?
Shortly after 9/11, I gave up my job. You know, I had this passion for music, and I felt like I had things to say and to talk about.
I've learned to live with what's happened. We've learned to live with the daily sadness, but I don't think anything's ever healed for me. I think I've learned to live with it. As time's gone on, I feel like I've missed him more and more, and actually it's got harder because he has missed out on so much of my life, and in that I've missed out on so much of his life. Find your teddy. There he is. Where? He's all wet, isn't he, your cheeky monkey? Yeah. Oh, should we put him back? He's for Uncle David, isn't he? I just feel like there was no reasoning, and I still feel like there was no reasoning. But that's a feeling that if you don't put to one side, you'll never live.
Looking at 9/11 10 years on and just seeing this continual cycle of violence, you think, actually, yeah, we need to find some sort of reconciliation. We need to find some sort of way forward that isn't just about killing each other.
I think it's quite important to consider sacrifices made by people all over the world, in Afghanistan, Iraq and elsewhere, and not necessarily just in England and in America.